Hi guys, welcome back to Clockwork Dan to Noodles. I'm not okay right now, but we need to discuss what happened. Hello and welcome. This is episode 16's breakdown of To Your Eternity. We're going to go through the bits and pieces that I want to talk about, some good things I want to analyse. There's a few decent bits and pieces that I think are really clever this week. And we need to discuss the new information that has come to light. Before we get going, make sure you guys are subscribed. In 2 weeks' time, you are getting my midway review. In this review, I will tell you my top 3 EDs, OPs, and where do I stand with my top 3 anime so far halfway through the season. It's been a very interesting season and it's different compared to the 2 seasons we've kicked off with so far for 2021. But I've got lots to say, so make sure you guys are notified whenever that video goes out. There is also a Discord channel too, to give yourself a notification to your phone whenever that does drop. So let's get to it because there's a lot to dive into this week. We've got backstories, confessions, and of course, plenty of heartache, pain, and twists. So welcome back. The narrator this week gaining a new nickname, the Arsehole in Black. I'm so sad that is the name. But it's very interesting because obviously this nickname has come out of a story that Fushi has finally opened up to tell the people around him, which is in itself a step forward and progression for Fushi as a character. He is finally telling his story to people. He is telling everybody around him, this is what's happened. There's this guy here, this random guy who tells me what to do, blah, blah, blah. We do discuss the idea that Fushi could perhaps transform into the fake boobs, the knockers. I don't think he could. I believe that half of the point of him transforming into people who have died is because at one point they were alive. Now, with the fake boobs, the knockers, we are not really sure if they're actually alive as we know it. They've never really been shown in a true form either. They've always been like this set of roots. These roots take form of other things that Fushi has owned. They feed off his memories. I doubt that he would ever be able to really turn it into them, but it's a very interesting thought that I took a moment to consider. Today's episode, the main themes running through it, a few of them are the ideas of dreams and hopes, which we are introduced to, and I think as well the idea of hatred. We'll get to hatred a little bit later on because there's a perfect example for it, but let's start with the initial theme that runs through the first half of the episode. That is the idea of dreams, goals, the idea of what do you want to do when you are older, what do you want to achieve. So we know that the narrator wants Fushi to preserve the world that he is in. He wants him to also stand up and wipe out the knockers, the fake boobs. But what does Fushi want to achieve? Because Fushi at this point even says this is something he hasn't really considered. It's a concept he doesn't really understand. So this is Fushi's next area of learning. This is what he needs to now develop and learn and understand. But it does set us up to start learning about the characters all around him. We know that everybody wants to leave the island. That is our main shared goal, because right now no one can really do much when you're trapped on an island of murder, death, and it's only really going to end one way. We know that getting off the island is the next goal. Everyone will then be able to step forward and start progressing. This is where we start to ripple into the setup for the backstory. So who is Tonari's dad? We know that she initially said that he was dead, which is correct. He did die in the backstory, but he is also a writer, as we are told. The idea of the dad, the way that he is presented in the story, is very interesting. There's a lot of did he, didn't he's, and I think it's supposed to be a bit more of a you can decide as the viewer whether he did. The moment where Fushi reads Tonari's diary, I also like the fact that he kind of stops. I want to believe that he realises that this is something I really shouldn't be doing without consent, so he stops. But perhaps he also just decides that he doesn't want to read anymore. The way that she writes and the way that he seemingly reads, it looks like the way that they write in this world is right to left. So when I saw her writing, it looked backwards to me. It's the Asian way of how you write in a book. So you would write on the right and then turn to the left, whilst in the UK at the very least, you start on the left and you go to the right. The backstory itself is truly interesting at the most because we get to see Tonari's hometown, her childhood, and initially it seems okay. We know that she really enjoys being able to read. She's also quite lucky because I did notice earlier that she can write at a very young age, so she's educated at least well enough to be able to do that. Her house is quite nice. We get a bit of backstory with the dad because he's not really there, but then he is and he's providing for them and he's got books and on his journeys and things. But it ends up going off to a very troubled start. I think she's about 7, roughly. All of this happens when she's very, very young. Her dad is accused of killing her mum. Whether he did it or not is open to debate because we don't see anything. And he tells Tonari, I didn't do it. And I don't know quite what I want to believe because we do see a bit later on that the arena changes him. But this is also something we see with Fushi a bit later on too. At the end of the day, both of them end up on the island, regardless of whether he did or he didn't. We know that Tonari ended up on this island very, very young, the island driven by death, control, and everybody is trying to get their own gains of trying to control and be the leader. But Tonari sees around her those people are just lusting for power as opposed to caring about the people around them, which is where Tonari ends up losing her dad. And now, not in a typical To Your Eternity fashion, that happens a little bit later on as well, but her dad ends up changing completely when he enters the ring. And I think you kind of have to when it comes to the arena where your life is on the line. You could die at any moment. Tonari's dad ends up becoming a completely different person and ends up very, very well. It seemingly looks like he actually wins. Then he's taken out. So he looks like he does actually win it. We know that Tonari ends up having to deal with all of this at a very young age, which is the idea of circumstance, environment. Those are the things that end up contributing and changing somebody into their adult self. These things all relate. So obviously with her, she has to learn quite quickly that this is the circumstance I'm in. There's no time to sit around and cry. We do see her crying alone a bit later on. She starts to understand these things very, very quickly. The tournament ended up perhaps revealing maybe true nature, maybe not. Did we see the murderous side of him come out? I think anybody is technically capable if you push them to the limits. Tonari, what does Tonari do at a very young age? And she sees her dad killing people and seeing that side of him that really doesn't seem like the man that she wants to believe he is. Well, she refuses to believe the man in the ring is actually her dad. And it's a bit more of a disassociative mindset because she refuses to believe that her dad would do that. That was her dad standing there in the ring. So she ends up scouring the dead bodies, which is horrifying in itself, thinking of a child poring over these dead bodies, trying to find her dad who isn't there. She wants to believe that her dad long ago died and it wasn't actually him standing in the ring. We see that she disassociates from him, which is then further explained when she doesn't react to seeing her own dad poisoned in front of her. But she does take the book as the last reminder of her dad. So she happily takes the book as the closure of the past, but to write her own story. She plans to make her own story now. We do see that Tonari is technically hurt by the loss of her father. She's perhaps aware and not aware at the same time, but we see her crying on her own. She takes the time to cry on her own, knowing that it's probably safer to cry alone. But that is when things start to change for her, and that is also where something very interesting happens, and this is our first analysis section. It's the music at this moment in time. It is radio static. And the reason why I think this is really clever, and also absolutely loving the choice to do so, is radio static is distorted. There's also always heavy distorted. There's a lot of background noise going on, which is what Tonari is going for. Tonari's childhood ends up aging her up mentally. It turns her into somebody a little bit different. Everything around her starts to get on top of her. We hear the voice hidden in the static. There's something there down below, a reminder of why she is trying to break free. But all of the situation, everything around her, drowning out the voice in her head, forcing her to act in a certain way around people and become a different person, her true self is being buried by everything around her. It's also very, very fuzzy, so perhaps as well it shows the mind state that she's in. Something is still driving her. She knows there's something deep down that she is trying to achieve. We also see the sequence where she ends up being ejected by the people around her. So we see how she eventually gets into pulling and luring criminals onto the island. And it's all with this one hope, that voice underneath that static, the hope to one day escape, one day maybe find herself. She does even say herself, I lost sight of my true self, which is why the static is even better. Because that voice under the static, which is being drowned out, being distorted, that's her voice. That is the voice of herself trying to break free. As soon as she meets Fushi, the clean, clear vocals start to kick in because Fushi ends up helping her regain her old self. He presents a new hope. He blasts away that static that has been clouding her mind. That is why I think this little tiny musical moment, very, very clever. I'm helping you guys at least draw some genius to how amazing this choice of music really is. It not only shows you cleverly and very subtly that how things are starting to get a bit drowned out, but you yourself pick up on the voice, but you can't really make anything out because we're in a very uncertain future. The world ahead of her is very uncertain. She must have had pretty unclear ideas of how her life might even go. And there's a few twists which all end in the same name this week. We'll have the first twist, and the twist revealing who ended up getting Fushi put on the island in the first place. I called this one. It's Hayase, aka Bitchface, and Bitchface, you are double Bitchface after this week's episode. It turns out that it was indeed Hayase who suggested that she puts Fushi on the boat because she predicted that he would rise up. She obviously knew who he was at that point. She knew he was immortal. She tells Tonari, you need to bring him on the island. You need to guide him. He will achieve great things. Hayase ended up entering the tournament. We also understand what the idea of visitors are. Visitors are people who willingly go to the island to watch, like a spectator sport. And we are given the very key bit of information, which I think might help us work out motivation. The visitors can sometimes buy the people that they like. Keep that in mind for a minute. What I was trying to work out at this point was why and to what end goal did Hayase have to put Fushi on the island in the first place? So what would you gain? I didn't really know if it was possible for her to even win. She knew he was immortal. She was facing an immortal who has at least grown a little bit, has a few more tricks under his sleeve. Obviously, we get the answer to this question later down the line. I kept trying to work out what the motivation behind Hayase would be. And I believe I have figured it out. I believe that she is intending to buy Fushi and own the immortal as her own. We know that she wanted Fushi for her kingdom. They were going to use him as an experimentation. Still want to believe that she ends up being kicked out of the kingdom after losing Fushi. She's trying to do a bit of a redemption thing, going, hey, look, I've got him now. I'm in charge of him. I own him. And I'm bringing him back. Or as well, she might also be trying to own the immortal for her own game. Something that she can gain. So she can then control Fushi and have him as her own. This is the conclusion I've worked out to why she's entered, why she set it up, why did she need Fushi on the island, why she didn't kill him when she had a chance. He was asleep and she decides to lick his face as opposed to harm him. A lot going on, and I think the reason why is because she intended to win, as we see later on. The people who win become obviously the leader of the island. She should be the clan leader, but she's also a visitor who has the right to buy the people that they like. Winning the tournament would allow her to gain those rights. We have an emotional reunion between Piran and Fushi. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment, but I do question March's ability to stick to a rock like a bug. That promise that Fushi will try and save Piran. Now is going to be very interesting because it seems that Fushi may have just lost his chance to save Piran by losing. But it is a moment where Piran starts to realise how much Fushi has grown and how reliable he has become. It is a huge moment of growth, and this is also where we get the main theme starting to play. It plays on the strings at its fullest. We haven't actually heard the main theme play for a while. I like the fact that it's been brought in because it's a very touching moment. It's a moment where Fushi is growing in himself and he's starting to go, this is what I'm going to achieve. This is what I want. I'm going to come and save you. I will do this. The main theme that played in the major key as well, so it was a happy, joyous moment. Let's talk about that final sequence now, the final fight. Tonari's gift at the beginning was the blowgun, which I was hoping would be the one ticket, the winning ticket to end up seeing him win. Like, I was predicting that it would get very, very close, and the one thing that would end up putting him ahead would be the blowgun, or like the gift from Tonari. Doesn't seem like we're getting it, unless next week's going to be a shocking twist. But we finally get Hayase's entrance. Fushi finally sees Hayase. We finally get her fully unveiled. And she manages to fire up my anger in just one sentence. Oh, I don't like you. Ooh, you are so evil. I hope the anime actually gives you some backstory and makes you a bit more complex and well written, because I want to know more about you, but I hate you right now. At the moment, it's just hatred. But I want the anime to give me some stuff about Hayase. Alongside the audience, Fushi finally feels hate. This must be one of the first times we see him feeling this negative emotion, a negative trait like hatred, and hatred is a dark one. It only really leads to suffering. Fixate on it too much and end up losing yourself, which is what I was worried for Fushi. He's never really experienced this negative emotion for himself. And plus, this is the first time he's experiencing it whilst he is finally conscious, where he's able to start thinking about things properly. As well, worried that this would be the time we see Fushi finally kill someone with the intent to kill. But then I was also thinking, Would he actually go through with it? Because March's thing was, I don't want you to kill something. She tried to get in the way of Perona killing the bear. Was the reason that the little voice in the head that stopped Perona actually firing for Hayase to begin with. And shame that you didn't, because it ends up being your downfall, and we'll talk about that twist in a minute. I had a feeling that maybe Fushi would eventually get there, get ready to kill her, and then the voice of March would be in his head telling him not to. However, Hayase isn't gonna let that go through, and Hayase is the big twist for this arc, I believe, and she evades the bear very, very easily. Like, there's nothing beyond this, there's nothing even between them, which shows us, the audience, how much of a threat this person really is, because up until this point, Fushi has done pretty well evading people and evading monsters, but Hayase, not so much. And we finally get the reveal that we were all commenting about in the comments, and we were all predicting, and that's what would have happened. Who was responsible for Perona's death? And I called it. Figured that the poetic way of doing this would be having her kill both of them. And it seems like she killed a bit more than just both of them, but we'll talk about that bit in a second. So it's one of those things where a lot of us were trying to figure out how she died, whether we'd actually see it or not. It does actually grant us our horrible, sad wish of showing it. It is not YouTube friendly whatsoever, so the picture will stay whatever it is right now, and it's going to stay for a little longer because I can't show any of this. It is brutal, and it makes you really, truly hate Hayase even more, because poor Perona ended up being murdered, at least the man in the hut. I want to believe that the entire village was perhaps wiped out as well, but we only really see the guy behind her, who was probably protecting her, and then poor Perona is strung up, and it's a horrible death. She ends up losing her head, and it's nasty. It's truly nasty, and it just shows you that maliciousness that is behind Hayase, that cold, that unwavering. We've seen her try and kill a child with no remorse. We're seeing her now wipe out Perona as well, and perhaps maybe even an entire village. Fushi's declaration to kill Hayase. This is a moment where it seemingly shocks Tonari, and I wondered if this was because she originally rejected her dad when it came to him changing in the arena. That idea of him suddenly going out for blood and actually killing for the sake of killing. I wondered if this would maybe put her off for a little second, or at least make her double think about Fushi, because the arena is seemingly bringing out the worst in everyone, and we're now seeing Fushi too, determined to kill Hayase, determined to have that same drive of killing someone. It's that drive to kill that seemingly put her off her own father. But the fight is something of absolute beauty. It is gorgeously choreographed. I love the way that the camera pans back and forth. We see the exchange as we see it flows quite nicely. The way that Fushi slips through as a mold, and it'll change, and there'll be a bear, then it'll be a dog. And it's a beautiful way of just showing him flip-flopping between these forms. And this is still something for Fushi to even be clapped on. He's able to handle his forms a lot better, understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of the forms that he carries. But Fushi really is just out of his league. It's a shocking twist at the end, because Fushi ends up losing, sadly, to the same thing that we saw earlier. Fushi was able to produce food with the sleeping draft in it. We now see him knocked out by the same sleeping draft that knocked him out for the first time as well, when he was sat with March Perona. For the second time, Fushi has been knocked out by the same drug. However, the blade in Hayase's hand seemingly moving and pulsating at the end. Maybe we're going to get a round 2. Maybe it's going to be they declare the winner, then suddenly he comes back. So that would be very interesting. Do we think that the fight is over just yet? I hope not. I really hope that Fushi can come back and bring out the win. So it's been a traumatic episode. We see that Hayase win. I did predict that she's probably now going to turn around and buy Fushi, control him, have him as hers, or bring him back to her kingdom to get herself reinstated in the kingdom, perhaps. Must talk about her ability to evade Fushi so well. She really is a powerhouse. She's light on her feet. She's nimble. She is on it. Her reflexes are good. As much as we hate her, we've got to say that those really are her prominent roles. Maybe Fushi will eventually get that form as well. Maybe. Does he even want the Hayase form? I don't think he'd want to use her. But the fight itself was absolutely gorgeous. I loved the way that it was flowing. I loved the camera angles that we got. I thought it was great. It was a little bit nervous. It was quite fast paced as well, so it didn't drag on or anything. We had those many, many twists along the way, and that shock reveal. So where are we going to go next? There are now only 3 episodes left of this first chunk. Perhaps we're going to have more. Maybe there'll be a second season. But at least for the first season of To Your Eternity, there's 3 episodes left. And I think we are now in the final arc. What we need to see now is Hayase has to be dealt with one way or the other. Maybe it's going to end on a bittersweet ending. Maybe she ends up taking him away. Tonari, at some point, I think she's going to die because we've seen her in the montage of the characters. At some point, I think she's going to die, but how is this going to happen? Vaguely recalled the image of her falling and then crying blood, but that might have been my imagination bringing that together, so maybe that's a hint of what's going to happen. Is Pirin ever going to be released? Are they going to make it out? Is Fushi going to wake up again? Perhaps the idea of him being drugged once by the same drug and he's got immunity to it? Maybe. Is the narrator going to step in? Don't know, but it would be great to see him stepping in here because I feel like he's needed. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next week. Do you guys think this fight is over? Because I don't think it is. I will see you guys again soon. Have many hugs because this is Trauma Monday after all. And we had to put up with that horrific death scene for poor Perona. Perona, you were one of my favourites. I loved her character design. I loved everything about her. And I really loved the way that she moves in a fight. Very, very sad to see that her ending was so gruesome and sad. I bet she now wishes that she had maybe aimed a little bit higher. So have a good day, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.